D2 World Life here with WCW's biggest fan, Riptides.
Fuck you, you Peter Griffin sandwich eating out of a glory hole, son of a bitch.
Oh, yeah, no. Anyway,
Yes.
today we are reviewing the worst rated WCW pay-per-view events in history by Wrestling Bios. And, to be honest, I'm only using this as fuel to see what torturous pay-per-views I can find.
Uh-huh.
Because we know you love anything WCW related.
Fuck you.
Without any further ado, let's get this list started.
Today we're going to head back to cagematch.net and take a look at the worst rated WCW pay-per-views of all time. We have got events that span multiple eras of WCW, with some you totally expect to be here and others that might surprise you. These shows were rated by wrestling fans who visited cagematch.net to leave a review. You might not necessarily agree with some of these ratings, so let me know your thoughts in the comments, and eventually we'll come back to this and put together another video with your thoughts and opinions in mind. At number 10, we have WCW Super Brawl 2000, held in the famous Cow Palace in San Francisco on the
Okay, to be fair, any WCW pay-per-view from 2000 was crap.
That was shit.
20th of February. What a lot of folks brought up about this show is the fact that WCW's mid-card roster had been completely decimated thanks to guys like the Radicals leaving for WWF. And what WCW was left with was a mid-card filled with stars from the past and new guys that hadn't been given enough adequate time on weekly television. WCW crammed 11 matches into a 3-hour show, so the first half of Super Bowl 2000 has bouts that only last for around 5 minutes or under. You've got some pretty bad stuff here, including Booker versus Big T, Tank Abbott pulling a knife on Big Al, The Wall versus the Kiss Demon. That was the match that was billed as a main event due to contractual obligations to the Kiss band, yet it played out in the middle of the card and the Demon got squashed. You've also got Brian Knobbs versus Bam Bam Bigelow. Yeah, it's not good. Not good at all. You can get something out of Ric Flair versus Terry Funk, but there's not much point in watching that one either, seeing as you can go back and watch their previous classics instead. The show's headlined with a World Heavyweight Championship 3-way dance, Sid Vicious versus Scott Hall versus Jeff Jarrett, and the audience just doesn't care. By the looks of things, neither did Roddy Piper, who made his 100th WCW return at the end of the show. WCW New Blood Rising comes in at number 9, and I'm just realising I have some dark days ahead of me when I review this and Super Bowl 2000 for reliving the war. My god. New Blood Rising took place in Vancouver on the 13th of August 2000.
Oh, we know that one was one of your favorite events.
Shit.
The New Blood had already dissolved in WCW when this pay-per-view took place, so yeah, good job. And New Blood Rising was actually scheduled in 2000 to take over from the old Road Wild events held by WCW. Now, I do think there's some good stuff here. Lance Storm versus Mike Awesome is a heavily gimmicked affair, but it has some good action. And the Booker T versus Jeff Jarrett main event isn't terrible, but there is some bad stuff here too, such as Goldberg taking part in a poor work shoot angle when he refused to take a jackknife and he decides to walk out of a match. Yeah, that actually happened. You also get the Great Muta competing in 2 matches, and this is something I'd usually love to see, but sorry, his performances on this night aren't good at all. But hey, we can always rely on Sting, right? Well, Sting's match against the Kiss Demon ends in under a minute. Imagine paying money to see the icon of WCW and you get treated to a 53-second Sting versus Demon match. Absolutely terrible. 1991's Great American Bash comes in at number 8, held on July 14th. Ric Flair had just left WCW for the WWF, and boy,
Yeah. No, WCW events back then weren't great without Ric Flair.
Fans in the Baltimore Arena let WCW management know that they weren't too happy about it. The WCW Heavyweight Championship was vacated, and so Lex Luger wrestled Barry Windham for the title. The match wasn't terrible, by the way, but it's not the match fans wanted to see. This title match did not headline the Great American Bash though. Missy Hyatt and Rick Steiner teamed up to take on Arn Anderson and Paul E. Dangerously inside a steel cage. Yes, that was the main event of this annual WCW pay-per-view, and it was terrible. There's a scaffold match featuring Bobby Eaton and PN News taking on Steve Austin and Terry Taylor. That one could have been interesting, but it wasn't. What you get here are four guys absolutely terrified of falling off the scaffold, and justifiably so, may I add. So they have this match while exercising a serious amount of caution, which...
Oh, we know that was also one of your favorite matches.
Trash.
Doesn't equal a good wrestling bout, in my opinion. What else? There's Elegante versus the one-man gang if you need to take a nap in the middle.
Any match with the Giant Gonzalez is trash.
Yes.
Middle of the show. Big Josh versus Black Blood or Billy Jack Haynes. It's brutal stuff, absolutely brutal. The Sting versus Nikita Koloff Russian chain match isn't terrible though, so that's something you can watch. And even though fans in attendance didn't think much of Luger versus Windham, I think it's still worth watching, especially if you're into the history of the World Championship. Great American Bash, however, shows us how much Ric Flair meant to fans of WCW, and it also shows us how hurt some fans were when he departed for the WWF. WCW Uncensored pay-per-views have always been notoriously bad. Uncensored 2000 is no exception.
Well, this is the worst rated WCW pay-per-view event, so of course you're going to be yelling out trash. And in your defense, like I said earlier, any WCW pay-per-view from 2000 was trash.
Uncensored 2000, taking place in Miami, Florida on the 19th of March, features the much beloved Yavapai strap match, and still to this day, nobody knows what Yavapai is. There's a Yavapai tribe in Arizona, but Yavapai, I have no idea. The promos leading up to this main event were absolute gold for all the wrong reasons, but the match itself features Hulk Hogan forgetting the rules towards the end of the bout, and he not only pins Ric Flair, but he also touches all four corners as you normally would in a strap match. So, effectively, Hulk Hogan beat Ric Flair twice in one match, brother. It's crazy to think that Flair versus Hogan was once the ultimate dream match back in the 80s and early 90s. They had so many matches in WCW, and to be fair, they usually did do big business. But the ship had sailed by the time Uncensored 2000 came along, and the sheer unintentional comedy of the Yavapai strap match just makes it all the more brutal. There's a serious reliance on stars of the past in this event, and not a single match delivered. Dustin Rhodes versus Terry Funk, Sting versus Lex Luger, Sid Vicious versus Jeff Jarrett, and the aforementioned Hogan versus Flair match are all bad, and the undercard feels like a typical episode of Nitro. Keep in mind that Nitro was also in a bad place around this time period. Unfortunately, this isn't the last uncensored event in our video today. WCW's Great American Bash 99 gets ranked in at number 6 as the worst WCW event of all.
Is it bad? I remember watching this event when I was younger, and all I can think about was like, wow, this one was garbage.
Trash.
Time, according to the Fine Boys and Girls ranking pay-per-views over on Cage Match anyway. This one took place in Baltimore. One reviewer called it Heroes of Wrestling level bad, which is the lowest insult anyone could ever give a wrestling pay-per-view. And someone also said it's worse than ECW's December to Dismember event, so we must be onto something with this one. Personally,
As
I
you
think
can tell, they
the Soldiers, Conan and
Heroes of Wrestling in there.
And they reference your favorite ECW event, December to Dismember.
December to Dismember wasn't bad. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad.
Yeah, I don't think my overall score or grade for that show when we review is going to be high. Just telling you right now.
It wasn't bad. It wasn't. It was good. It wasn't great.
Mysterio taking on the West Texas Rednecks, Bobby Duncombe Jr. and Kurt Hennig, isn't a bad match at all. And also, the tag team title match featuring DDP and Canyon winning the belts from Chris Benoit and Perry Saturn is a decent matchup, but I do agree that the Great American Bash 99 offers nothing else of value really. This one also features a Falls Count Anywhere match between Sting and Rick Steiner. Both guys were a little sloppy throughout the match, and I'd say it's possibly one of Sting's worst pay-per-view matches ever. It's definitely a low point for the Icon. But what makes it even worse is the ending when Sting gets bitten by some doggos. Now, no man should ever get bitten by a dog for our own amusement, but Sting's holding that towel for 1 second and then the next it's wrapped around his hand. It's a real bad camera cut and it takes you out of the moment completely. The main event featured Kevin Nash taking on Macho Man Randy Savage. If you ever want to see Nash delivering Snake Eyes to Miss Madness, then this is the match for you. We also get the return of Sid on this pay-per-view, and I don't care what anyone says, seeing Kevin Nash take a powerbomb is always a sight to behold, so the final move of the pay-per-view gets a thumbs up from me. You've also got Van Hammer versus Mikey Whipwreck. Mikey deserved better. You've got Ernest Miller versus Horace Hogan, Buff Bagwell versus Disco Inferno, Roddy Piper versus Ric Flair that ends with a dumb swerve, and you've also got an opener featuring Brian Knobbs taking on Hack in a standard garbage match. Brian Knobbs shouldn't have been getting pushed in mid-99, I'm sorry. The Heroes of Wrestling show is worse, by the way. Not sure if I'd watch this over December to Dismember, though. It should have really
Again, you see that they reference Heroes of Wrestling.
What? Yeah.
I said again, you see that they reference Heroes of Wrestling.
I am afraid of what's to come in like 2 weeks.
Number 5, it's WCW Uncensored 1995 from Tupelo, Mississippi, taking place on the 19th of March. This was the first ever uncensored event WCW ever produced, and during the build-up, WCW would mislead their viewing audience into thinking this was going to be an all-out extreme pay-per-view. The name itself implied that there was nothing off limits. It was time for WCW to get a piece of the pie that ECW was hogging all to themselves, and every match on the card would be something only the most hardcore of hardcore fans would be able to stomach. Turns out WCW lied to everyone because, in reality, the first Uncensored show was an almost cartoony take on the world of extreme wrestling, like a parody of what other promotions were doing. The show kicks off with the infamous King of the Road match. I've covered this one before, but to show you how extreme WCW was at the time, everyone involved in this match, including match agent Dusty Rhodes, got fired because there was blood involved in the match. What's baffling about this is the fact that the King of the Road match was taped. So if WCW really didn't want to show blood, then they didn't have to air the match, and instead they could have done something completely different. With King of the Road out of the way, I do think you get 2 decent matches on this show, those being Arn Anderson versus Johnny B. Bad and Sting versus Big Bubba Rogers. Anderson versus Bad's a boxer versus wrestler match, and I know that sounds terrible, but given the stipulation, the guys involved did the absolute best they could. Anderson, in particular, was very good here. And while Sting versus Bubba does drag in certain spots, the match overall is definitely worth your time. It's not bad. Everything else at this show ranges from bad to downright awful. Ming and Jim Duggan have a martial arts match. Yeah, Jim Duggan in a martial arts match. It's impossible to take seriously. You get Avalanche versus Macho Man, a match that ended in disqualification even though the show was billed as being completely no DQ from top to bottom.
Logic, am I right?
It was garbage.
All this was garbage.
Flair in drag attacked Macho Man, and that's how it ended. Absolutely fantastic. Harlem Heat and the Nasty Boys go all the way to the concession stands where their match turns into a slip and slide. WCW went through the trouble of building their own little concession stands here that look like something straight from the 1970s. I mean, when do you ever see concession stands out like this on a live pay-per-view? Hogan takes on Vader in the main event. It's a strap match that Hogan won after dragging Ric Flair to all 4 corners and touching the turnbuckle pads. No, Ric Flair wasn't legally involved in this match, but who cares, right? Loads of run-ins, you get Randy Savage and the Renegade joining in on the fun. Not a good show at all, but at the same time, it's a show that you might find some humour in. It's so stupid that it becomes funny. WCW Halloween Havoc 2000 is the only Halloween Havoc event featured on our video today. This one took place in Las Vegas, Nevada on the...
Do you really want to torture me? Speaking of Halloween Havoc, you really want to torture me with that one?
Trash. Garbage.
I bet.
29th of October, the MGM Grand has held some classic events, but the whole arena needed fumigated after Halloween Havoc 2000. Again, it's 11 matches crammed into one pay-per-view. It's so hard to watch this event in just one sitting because it begins to drag on after the first 20 minutes or so, and you just feel you could have been spending your time in a much more productive manner. Now, to give credit, I enjoyed the opening match, the Filthy Animals versus Natural Born Thrillers versus Boogie Nightspouts. Mike Awesome versus Vampiro is also worth watching just to see the Awesome Bomb from the top rope. I just showed you it now, so you don't need to watch it. Booker T versus Scott Steiner is a solid enough title match, but the rest of the event is absolute dog shit. I got some bad flashbacks while recording this footage. There's a First Blood DNA match between Buff Bagwell and David Flair. David wanted to prove that Buff Bagwell was the father of Stacy Keibler's unborn child. So David had to bust Bagwell open, gain a sample, and bring it to some doctors he brought along to the pay-per-view. I am not making this up. David couldn't get the job done, but Lex Luger turned on Bagwell because WCW, and David got that sample that he needed. Absolutely wild. Following this, Mike Sanders took on Ernest Miller in a 3-round kickboxing match. The winner of this bout would become commissioner of WCW, but the match is just about as entertaining as it sounds. In the show, strangely headlined with a 2-on-1 elimination match, Goldberg versus Chronic. This main event goes just over 3.5 minutes, and it's pretty much a squash match. Goldberg wins, Chronic deserved better. The show fades out, and you just feel like you've wasted an afternoon when all's said and done. It's the final Halloween Havoc show WCW ever produced. These events were always kind of special thanks to the overall theme and style, but it's a terrible shame that Halloween Havoc went out on a bad note. You can really sense that something was terribly, terribly wrong with WCW around this time period. At number 3, it's the third and final WCW.
Okay. I could say I've seen this event. It's garbage too.
What are you guys doing? Come on.
They're out there producing more WCW events. Yeah, shit. But anyway, yeah, this one's bad.
WCW Uncensored show in our video today. Uncensored 1996 from Tupelo, Mississippi. This one took place on the 24th of March. It's a show I already covered on the channel, and it's the main event of Uncensored 96 that's made the event so notoriously bad. Yes, it's the Doomsday Cage match. The Mega Powers, consisting of Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage, defeating Arn Anderson and Ric Flair, and Lex Luger, and Kevin Sullivan, and Ming, and the Barbarian, and Zeus or Z-Man, and the Ultimate Solution. I said this before, but the Doomsday Cage structure looked good because it looked different. There's something about these giant setups that always draws my attention, but the bell had to ring and the match had to take place. Hogan and Savage defeating 8 guys sounds like a bad joke without the Doomsday Cage even being involved. But add in that cage with multiple levels, sprinkle in some bad TV production, give the fans at home no real idea of how this match is supposed to work until minutes before bell time, and have competitors in the match who forget the rules as the match progresses. Yeah, you have an absolute bona fide disaster. A disaster that WCW wanted fans to pay for. It's a messy main event that I really do believe could have been good if more time and thought was put into the overall direction of the bout. But the guys in the match had no clue what was going on, and the more involved or thought out spots of the match are executed very poorly. It's not even a match you can laugh at for being so bad because there's nothing remotely funny about it. It's just bad. I think it sucks even more because it could have been something good, but yeah, avoid it at all costs. It's not worth your time. In the semi-main event, you've got the Road Warriors versus Booker T and Sting. Sting teamed up with Booker T because Lex Luger left him high and dry when the Total Package got a spot in the main.
Yeah, I seen that Doomsday Cage match. Unfortunately, that one was awful.
Why do you think I said trash?
Exactly.
event. And while it sounds okay on paper, this tag team Chicago street fight is a slog to get through in my opinion. I remember when reviewing Uncensored 96, I actually had to stop midway through this match and take a break because it was so mind-numbing. The Booty Man defeated DDP in a 16-minute match right in the middle of the card. So if you ever want to watch a long Booty Man match, then Uncensored 96 is probably the show for you. You get Colonel Robert Parker taking on Medusa because that's a match that everyone wanted to see. The Giant versus legendary British wrestler Giant Haystacks or Loch Ness goes for 2.5 minutes. Trust me, it's actually a good thing that the match went this short. But to be fair, Conan versus Eddie Guerrero and Fit Finlay versus Steve Regal are decent matches. The finish to Regal versus Finlay was a bit crap though. You've been warned, Uncensored 96 will destroy your soul. Watch it at your own risk.
You know how much you want to watch Uncensored 96 for our review, don't you?
I swear. Just remember whose turn it is next week.
Oh, I know. That'll be the last review until after New Year's too. You're gonna make me end on a shit note, aren't you?
The second worst WCW pay-per-view of all
Another
time,
pay-per-view from
according to
2000.
fans
Trash.
voting on Cage Match,
Garbage.
is the 2000 Great American Bash, held again in Baltimore, Maryland. This event took place on the 11th of June 2000, and even looking at the match card without looking at the pay-per-view, there's nothing here that would have made fans eager to watch. The match bookings are either very dull or they're matches you've seen before. Vampiro versus Sting, Jeff Jarrett versus Kevin Nash, G.I. Bro versus Sean Stasiak, Chavo Guerrero versus Disco Inferno. Again, just looking at this card and watching footage again for the sake of this video gives me a stark reminder that I need to review some of these shows for reliving the war, and I'm going to end up on the drink or something. I need to be in some kind of altered state to get through these upcoming monstrosities. You've got an Asylum cage match on this show, a WCW blunder I covered in the past, and easily one of the worst Asylum cage matches of the whole bunch. This one features Big Papa Pump taking on his brother and Tank Abbott inside the birdcage, and somehow Scott Steiner wins. The franchise takes on the wall in a table match, and I'll admit the finish of the match wasn't bad at all. There's a Ric Flair versus David Flair match that features David giving his little brother brain damage by shaking his head so much. You also get Vince Russo calling Charlotte Flair and Reid Flair little bitches. We get to see Billy Kidman climb up the ranks of WCW and have a match against Hollywood Hogan, only for Hogan to beat him thanks to, you guessed it, another swerve bro. And there's also a Human Torch match that I'm going to admit's a guilty pleasure of mine. I know everyone hates it, but if you thought Sting or Vampiro were getting legitimately set on fire during this show, then I don't know what to say. Our main event features Kevin Nash and Jeff Jarrett stinking the joint up for over 15 minutes. We get run-ins from everyone, and it ends with Goldberg turning heel and joining Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff just to send the fans home happy. I can think of many things I'd rather do than watch the Great American Bash 2000. It's seriously overbooked. You can tell it's a Vince Russo production right from the get-go.
That gives me ideas.
You make me
We've had some
watch
terrible events in
watch something even worse.
this video, and I'm going to be suffering from PTSD for a very long time just from watching clips of these events. The honour goes to WCW Bash at the Beach 99, held in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, July 11th, 99.
Oh, that's your
now,
favorite
do
event.
I personally think this is the worst WCW pay-per-view of all time? No, I don't. Some of the other events we already looked at are way worse than this, but it's still very bad. There's a pretty good 3-on-2 match here for the tag team titles, the Jersey Triad versus Chris Benoit and Saturn, but everything else on the card is pretty miserable, and you'll probably want to rip your eyeballs out when the event comes to an end. Ernest Miller versus Disco Inferno, Rick Steiner versus Van Hammer, and David Flair versus Dean Malenko. Those are the first three matches. David Flair actually gets a win over Malenko, by the way, at the 3-minute mark, so yeah, it tells you all you need to know, really. There's a No Limit Soldiers versus West Texas Rednecks elimination match that should have been better. This was contested under Survivor Series rules, and seeing as this little feud was one of the more entertaining aspects of WCW during this time period, you would have thought a little more effort was put into the general booking of the match. It does fall flat, but this, along with the aforementioned Jersey Triad match, are the only reasons why you should ever consider watching this pay-per-view. The Junkyard Hardcore Invitational match is a complete mess, and it's difficult to watch on.
Okay, I admit that was shit.
They shot that from a fucking helicopter. That was bullshit.
Yep.
On TV. It's absolutely mindless, and it's filmed in such a way that trying to follow anything that's going on is just pointless. There's a Buff Bagwell and Roddy Piper boxing match that's refereed by Mills Lane. It makes the Johnny B. Bad versus Arn Anderson wrestler versus boxer match look like Steamboat versus Savage. In the main event's a tag team match that also has the world title on the line. Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? It's one of those whoever gets the pinfall wins the belt kind of deals, and Randy Savage ends up leaving Fort Lauderdale as the new world champion. It's crazy to think that just 3 years earlier, WCW made history with Bash at the Beach 96, an event that still gets brought up to this very day, and a pay-per-view that's so significant when discussing the evolution of the whole wrestling business. 3 years later, and well, everything's just fallen apart. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. There are more bad WCW pay-per-views out there, I know. Maybe you enjoyed some of the matches in today's video and you got something out of those matches that others didn't. Or maybe you were a die-hard WCW fan who just thought the company could do no wrong. Whatever the case, let me know, and one day I'll do this again and use feedback in from you guys to put together another upload. Cage match rankings can be a little flaky sometimes, and the sample pool isn't as big as I'd like it to be. So this is something we can always come back to and see what other events deserve to get ripped apart. As always though, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next Wrestling Bios video. Take care.
Yeah, Dustin, let him know that since you're a hardcore WCW fan, let him know what you thought.
I ain't no hardcore WCW fan. That's you.
No, that's you. You like Vince Russo as champion.
No. That's you.
Nope.
Yeah, and by the way, I know he went through only maybe about 10 of them, but an honorable dismention goes to Stargate 97.
Fuck you for making me want to fucking watch that.
Which, at time of recording, that's our next review. And we know that you love it.
Oh yeah, he announced which one I was gonna do next.
Oh God, no! You mentioned 2 of them, so that narrows it down. They're 2 shit ones. Fuck. I guess I'll find that out. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed our little reaction. Would you agree with this list, by the way?
Yes.
You like, yeah. You went down trash. Garbage. Gives me ideas for reviews. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed our little reaction to it and our thoughts on it, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.